afternoon. It's my honor and privilege to welcome you to the weekly BW Education Wednesday Wisdom. Today we are trying to take up an issue that really concerns everyone in the education ecosystem, that we privately talk about, we discuss, and we try to find out what will be the future of educational institutions in the future. Will they exist in the same form as they do now? The last 16 months have changed the way educational institutions engage with students, how professors and teachers engage with students, and how recruiters in the industry engages with the educational institution. To discuss this, we have three eminent leaders, if I may use that term, of the education ecosystem. Let me introduce all three of them. We have Dr. S.S. Mantha, the former chairman of the AICTE. He had 2 terms as the chairman, and during his leadership, he did bring in transparency and process to AICTE. And he's also been vice chancellor of many universities. He guides a lot of education entrepreneurs and education leaders, writes prolifically. So clearly somebody who has a very deep and a very sharp standpoint and a point of view on education. Welcome, Dr. Mantha. Let me also welcome Dr. Anup Singh, who's the Director General of the Nirma University, which is a large university, multidisciplinary university based out of Ahmedabad, and continues to add new streams for learning. And Dr. Anup Singh, again, is very well known in the academic circle. Welcome, Dr. Anup Singh. Last but not the least, let me welcome Dr. C.P. Shrimali, again a very eminent educationist. Dr. Shrimali was a professor in the area of OB/OD, and then he went on to lead MDI as the director of MDI Gurgaon. And again, somebody who's known to be affable along, knows how to build an institution, and understands human behavior, because that's what he taught. So welcome, Dr. C.P. Shrimali, for being part of today's discussion. I must declare that I have had the good pleasure of knowing both Dr. Singh and Dr. Shrimali for the last 27 years. They were my professors at MDI, and I can say that I would look forward to their classes. Over the last 12 years, I've had the good fortune of knowing Dr. Mantha and have had multiple interactions in various facets with him. While he was the chairman of AICTE, he did appoint me as the chairman of a committee on media and entertainment, and we did try to bring out a framework for that sector. But let us dive right into today's discussion. How do you create the educational institution of the future? How do you reinvent your education institution every now and then? Make it future-proof. So let me start by first bringing in Dr. Mantha as a policymaker in the past and somebody who's now part of educational institution. How do you think that can be done? Is there a playbook to do that?
Yeah, good evening, Anurag, Dr. Singh and Dr. Shrimali. In the current times, yes, it's a very important question to understand and try and debate on. First of all, the basic building blocks of an institution, or building a institution or building a university, is will still remain the same. Basic building blocks will have to be there. The mode of delivery probably will become more of a little bit of face-to-face and a little bit of online education, in the sense that it becomes blended learning. So in future, probably we need institutions which can bring them together, the face-to-face learning as well as the online learning. Which means that there are a lot of pedagogies which will need to change. And in the past, what we have found is that webinars are conducted lectures are conducted in the form of webinars, and a teacher goes through a lot of monologue for maybe 45 minutes and so on, and there's hardly any interaction, and therefore the connect is not there. And within the classrooms, what appeals to a student is the emotional connect that he can find, and which is completely absent in a asynchronous mode of learning. So one of the areas that people must concentrate is on the the pedagogies that will evolve over a period of time, so that the engagement.
And what you're essentially saying is that talking to a student in a class is not talking to the camera. It is a performance. It involves interactivity. It involves human contact.
Absolutely.
Of a conversation.
Yes.
And inquisitiveness, curiosity that in the virtual setting is sometimes missing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
you're saying that the virtual, we will merge the best of both worlds, but a pedagogy which really combines the best of both needs to be evolved. Build on that, sir.
Yeah, there are two other things which probably the University of the Future will have to look at. There is a great amount of expectation from the students as the world outside is changing. He has a lot of aspirations which the university must meet with, and that is possible only if there are collaborations. The future world is not working in silos. Institutions have for long been working as specific silos and trying to build quality within the systems, trying to build every system within one roof and under one roof and things like that. That is not going to work anymore in future. A lot of collaborations will need to happen. Maybe collaborations between institutions, something that people would have laughed off maybe 5 years back, like 3-4 private institutions coming together and collaborating, to give out a much better, final product from a student's perspective. They have to collaborate with industries. They have to collaborate with, for almost everything.
Dr. Mantha, just to say that's already happening. IIT and IIM Indore, IIT Indore and IIM Indore, because of being in Indore, have come out with a joint course. So what you're saying is already happening.
One point where I have a specific, idea to elaborate in the context of collaboration. What you are saying is probably happening in certain sectors of working, but what I have is something different. We have almost 45,000 institutions in the country and almost 950 universities. Now look at online paradigm. You need to invest in IT infrastructure, maybe not so much in brick and mortar anymore, but there is a lot of IT infrastructure that is required. There is a very marked digital divide, which means that you need to go to the students and try and reach out to students in the online mode and so on. Now, is it possible that every single institution, 45,000 number, and those universities that we are talking about, will each one of them invest in the IT infrastructure and go through the building up the LMS, building up the content and subscribing to third-party content and things like that? So therefore, a lot of these so-called collaboration must look at the building the IT infrastructure also, which is shared across institutions. For example, one should be looking at a common LMS platform, which where you do white labeling, you do multi-instancing, and then provide that framework to every institution, and then subscribe to content which can be shared across institutions. Maybe there is a good physics department in some institution. There is good mathematics in some other institution. Get the content, create the content on that basis. Put all that together. Create one basic portal which gets at all the institutions. Now add to that your virtual desktops, you add to that virtual servers, virtual networks, and so on, and cloud source the content and the expertise that you have. And you have now moving towards, the virtualization of education. Now that kind of collaboration is required.
So, sir, that's just to be provocative. And I said it in the notes to you. Do you think a university can exist on a cloud, no physical infrastructure or minimal physical infrastructure, but in terms of content, professors, placements being world-class? Do you think that is a possibility? And we'll see new universities that don't exist today coming up and in some way creating what we are talking of?
It's a very real possibility. And the board, in fact, it's happening in bits and pieces in various places. it needs to come together to consolidate the expertise that each people has. Like I said in the beginning, it's not about providing everything under one roof and trying to run a structures which are unwieldy anyway. You can't possibly do that, except of course where the funding comes from the government, and you need other interests which have to be taken care of, and so on. So the second aspect is one of collaboration of different kind, where all the expertise is pulled together and create systems which can reach out to people in remote locations, all those people who cannot be reached, and things like that. Of course, there is a lot of technology that is required and to make that happen, and so on. So that's the second part, where the cost to education, cost to student can come down by doing all this. What is the ultimate idea? Best of the quality must reach the best of all the students at the least cost. So somewhere, unless you pool in resources, that will not happen. And the third part is the regulatory system must enable this, and therefore should move out from the current regulatory regime to a facilitating mechanisms. I mean, we did bring out some amount of facilitation built into the system, but it needs to move out into a space where it is still taboo for the regulatory space. So therefore, it's very necessary that you bring in rules. Unfortunately, what we are doing is we are bringing out rules which assume that the other fellow is going to make a mistake, and how do I go and catch him? Now that kind of system,
we have to move to inspiration and enablement rather than regulation and certification. That's what you are saying. Thank you for your opening comment, Dr. Mantha. Let me bring in Dr. Anup Singh for his opening comments and remarks. He's seen many institutions for the last 15 odd years. He's been with Nirma and now been leading Nirma for more than 8-9 years. Clearly, he has a large campus, beautiful campus, large number of students on the campus, and we always romanticize the on-campus life. There is a charm to it. So let me see what he says. Dr. Anup Singh, all yours.
Thank you. Good evening to all. I'd like to see things in a historical perspective. See, if we look into the history of Homo sapiens, even in prehistoric times, we can go back up to 60,000 years. And in first 50,000 years, we lived in Stone Age, where there was no education, formal education. Of course, there was some education, but no formal education. And then from Stone Age, we moved into agricultural or agrarian stage, where we got formal education. And in 19th century, we moved into industrial stage, where we got university. Though Oxford was established in 12th century, but in 19th century onwards, we started having more and more universities, right? And universities had a very formal structure. The process of teaching and learning and assessment was formalized, and a new category of educational outcomes came. Now we are in another age, and that is digital age. So the University of Industrial Age is not going to be sufficient for the need of digital age. So that is my take. We have to create a new kind of institution, and there are some inklings, but there is no formal new setup, right? So we need to visualize that what kind of educational institutions are needed in a digital age. For that, we need to understand what is going to happen to India in next 15 years. So 3 things are going to happen to India in next 15 years. The most important thing is that our population is going to boom, right? We are currently 1.3 billion people, and in another 15 years, we would be touching around 1.5 billion. So we would be bigger than China, and we would be largest nation population-wise. So there would be big demand for schools, there would be big demand for colleges and the educational institutions. The second thing that is going to happen, that right now our GER, graduate enrollment ratio, is around 25%, and the government wants it to go to at least 50%.
The targeted thing is 64%.
64%, right? So a huge population is going to enter into higher education. And the third thing that is going to happen, that India is going to have a new kind of jobs that we don't know. So the kind of jobs that we have today, only 50% of them would remain there after 15 years. So we are going to enter into very cataclysmic environment, right? So how to deal with it? So what I visualize, that we would have three kind of institutions to cope with this kind of situation. One kind of institution would be the traditional university, campus-based, like what you were describing about Nirma. These kind of institutions are going to survive, and they would be there. However, they would not be serving more than 20 to 30% of the students. So what happens to another 70 to 80% of the students? They would be going for hybrid institutions where there would be brick and mortar as well as digital educational environment. And then there is going to be another kind of institution which would be more innovative, entrepreneurial and amalgamative. And these kind of institutions would be serving just 1 to 2% of the student population. They would be very, very different from established universities. They would be more like Caltech, they would be more like MIT, they would be smaller, right? And their focus would be research for business, right? And they would be selecting probably best of the minds from both student sector as well as the faculty sector, and they would probably represent the new institutions. This digital university, I think, is more or less accepted, and most of the institutions they are going for digital, and it is inevitable. But what we are not able to visualize, that how these new innovative and entrepreneurial institutions are going to come, and they are going to revolutionize the future. So that is one thing that I'd like to add. In terms of students, there is going to be a major change. For example, we used to think that if you have gone to university, that is something that comes to you once in your lifetime, and then you are not going to go back to university. That is going to change, right? People are going to come out of the school, go and work, come to university, again work for 7-8 years, again go to the university. So that is one trend which is going to be visible for the student population. The second trend which is going to be very important, that students are going to do a lot of learning on their own, right? So the facilitation and action-oriented learning would be done by the educational institution. The responsibility for information acquisition would be on the students. And the third thing is that either education would be very cheap or education would be very expensive, right? So through digital education, we are going to reduce the cost. But if we want the transformative and entrepreneurial and innovative learning, that is not going to be cheap. That is going to be very expensive. So we are going to see a paradox, that on one hand, education would be very cheap, and almost 80 to 85% people would be served by that. but for 10 to 15%, the education is going to be very, very expensive. So that is one trend. In terms of faculty, again, there would be segmentation in faculty. There would be people, who would be very good teachers, and they would be in demand for digital education because they can deliver very well, right? And there would be need for those people who understand the subject field, who can be innovative, as well as who are entrepreneurial. So they would be another class of people, and they would not be just teachers. They would be innovators, they would be businessmen, they would be pioneers. So that's where I can see faculty segmentation. So these are my initial thoughts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anup Singh. I'll come back to ask you what are you doing at Nirma to be able to implement the opportunities you see and the opportunities to leapfrog. But before that, let me bring in Dr. C.P. Shrimali. And first time I started with Dr. Mantha. Once Dr. Shrimali completes his opening remarks, I'll again start with Dr. Shrimali in this round. Dr. Shrimali, all yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think the centers of learning will continue to exist. We have large segments of society, different kinds of social segments, and different kinds of learning needs are there. So school, colleges, institutions, they will continue to exist. And technology will be an enabler. So therefore, there is no threat to the institutions per se. Also, the educational institution provide knowledge, some skills, capabilities, and competencies. And this happens not only from the faculty, but also from peers. So therefore, in physical format also, when the people come together, it will always be helpful in shaping their personality, working together in a class, interacting with each other, and doing projects together. So therefore, the building structures and infrastructures which are there, I think they all will continue to exist, and they all will continue to be required for face-to-face interaction. But yes, if it is 100% residential campuses, now a lot of learning will take place through digital mediums. But there, the role of digital is more as an enabler. Also, as Dr. Anup said, that universities also are responsible for evaluation and grading. Now, what kind of learning which is taking place, what kind of proficiency has been acquired, because there is a lot of dilution of education is happening, and large number of degree holders do not justify the kind of degree which they are holding, because the quality of education has deteriorated a lot, and therefore a good education institutions will do the branding that what kind of proficiency levels they have been able to build, and that would be acceptable to the society as also to the industry. So I think evaluation is going to be a very, very important part. Coaching, counseling, mentoring, guiding, helping, all these kind of processes will be there. So therefrom, from transaction-oriented institutions to a process-oriented institutions will emerge. So though the buildings are there, infrastructure there, but if it is only for transactions, no, transactions will reduce. And process-oriented, where the responsibility would be from taking from one level of competence to another level of competency, evaluating and graduating them to much higher level, and making them globally competitive. The beauty is that in present day, when the technology, which is acting as an enabler, a number of new possibilities and opportunities are emerging. Earlier, in a chalk and talk method of teaching, teacher would tell and students would listen. As Mantha Sahab has mentioned, now that process will end, because a lot of material would be available on the net, a lot of material would be available digitally, and therefore students would be, a lot of discussion should happen, and through discussions learning will happen, rather than discussions working together. That is what would be the predominant method, rather than just lecturing. Lecturing method would really diminish over a period of time. But then this digital thing also is providing a major challenge, that how do you make sure that the material which is available on the net, is it a good quality material? Is it an authenticated material? Because many things are being written in a different way and contradictory things are also being written, and it is going to create a lot of confusion among the student community, what is right and what is wrong, and what is colored and what is not colored. So therefore, there's going to be a great responsibility of the education institution to develop the curriculum, and around the curriculum, the kind of material. Because the material which is available, it is a lot of material available, but then one has to authenticate, one has to ensure quality standards are raised, and then that really helps the students to acquire knowledge. Another issue is that this technology has broken the boundaries. So in a class, as you rightly mentioned, I am able to visualize that there will be students from across the border, from all over the world. The students would be available working on the project together. Already, like in MDI, we have been doing a program called 1 MBA, and in 1 MBA class, the global students were there. India, Europe, America, in fact, from 5 continents, the students were there in each group, and they are all at a senior management level coming together, and their examinations are also being done. The teachers are global, students are global, and curriculum also is global. So I think that kind of things will become a reality in a much bigger way in the entire country, because our education would not be an isolated education only to India. It will be a global education, and global settings would be there. Finally, as an opening discussion, I would like to say that in this, the biggest challenge would be on the learner side, that learner will be able to join, will be very focused, whether he wants to do a complete MBA program, he wants to do a certificate program, he wants to do in a particular theme, what kind of specialization he wants to acquire.
What I call sectionization of education.
Sectionization, yeah. So that means
you can pick up what you want.
Yeah. He will pick up what he wants. If I want to be a supply chain expert, then I will go deeper into that supply chain area and get a proficiency in certification of that, and which will be acceptable globally. So I think those kind of things will start happening, because the market also is going to demand much more concrete capabilities among the candidates who are coming out from the institution. That today, whatever we have unemployment, that students have acquired a qualification which is of no use. So similarly, when research activities are there, the research is not translated into helping the society. It is only completing just thesis work. So I think a lot of qualitative change is going to happen. I am able to visualize that there are tremendous opportunities available and big challenges available before the educational leaders in the institutions, that how should they organize themselves to develop their faculty, develop their infrastructure, focus on development of the student community, clarifying the vision of their institution. So these are the areas in which the educational leaders will have to work. So I think as an opening remark, I would like to say that yes, the new opportunities are emerging, but brick and mortar kind of institutions will continue to exist. Only thing is they will have to adapt to the changing requirements.
Dr. Shrimali, I would like to add on to that. I ask you another question following this, because we're talking a lot about all the things that are changing, and some things like brick and mortar universities staying consistent, but maybe in a hybrid setting. But what are, in your opinion, some core practices? And not just opinion, in the last 2 years, what are some core practices that you have seen that have not changed and that you don't think will change?
I think when there is an institution, there will be head of the institution, there will be board, there will be a top management, whoever is setting up the institution. The first and foremost requirement for any institution would be clarity about the vision, that what kind of institution they want to build. In present day context, a large number of institutions have become a commercial institutions to doing an activity and transaction oriented institutions. There will be more demand about process centric institutions which are the centers of learning. And that means the vision of these boards will have to be very clear, that what kind of institutions we want to build, because I have seen mostly that at the board level, discussions are about the revenues, funds, budget, investment and all that. And in that, something which takes a back seat is research. In large institutions, if you do not create knowledge, I think you are not doing justice, because knowledge has to grow, and now to compete with the world, you have to constantly make investment on knowledge creation, and it is expensive. So very many times when the initiators of the institutions, they focus only on money, and they find that research is not paying paying much, then they may find that the teacher is not able to do justice, and teacher is not able to create wealth of knowledge. This is one area. So the another thing, so one vision has to be very clear about the institution. Second part is infrastructure also has to be aligned to the technological changes which are happening, because each student must have the availability of the kind of technology support which is required. Now that's again, the investment done currently in many institutions is not adequate, because technologies are changing fast. Technology requires investment of money, and many people are not able to invest. So therefore, there will be large number of institutions who are not able to invest adequately. They will lag behind, and there will be some centers of excellence which will be emerging, which are able to make right kind of investment in the technology. But I
so
think
we have
that
to pay attention to knowledge, and we have to make sure that certain mindset of being open to change does not change.
Right.
Dr. Mantha, would you like to answer this too? What are some core practices that you have seen in the past few years that have not changed?
There are
and is not likely to change, even if we have a more digital integrated educational environment. Even if it's not purely digital, what is not likely to change?
First of all, there are several good practices which are there in some of the institutions which are doing well even today, and one must not discount those practices before going on to think about the new practices as they are defined by the new challenges which are there. Now, let's look at some of the good practices that the institutions have. For example, if you have a good mix of, any good institution would only be as good as its faculty and as good as its students that it gets. Now, good faculty also need, not apart from the salary that they get, they must have an environment in which they can succeed. So, which means that good research facilities have to be created. Many of these institutions which we see today, they are most of the time good, maybe good teaching institutions, but hardly do any research, except those which we know traditionally, like the IITs or and maybe it's a few of the top ranked institutions or universities. They do not invest in research. The problem is they pick up. In fact, there are institutions which hold on to theoretical subjects and probably produce papers, any number of papers that you require, maybe even in the best of the journals that you require, but hardly anything happening on the ground. Which means that they don't invest anything in research and purely go by the gut, expertise of the teacher who is involved. So therefore, good research doesn't come out of our institutions at all. And having said that, even the research that comes in is highly specialized and very, very, very specific. I'm not saying that the researchers are not good or things like that. They move with the best of the people and so on. The real difficulty is they don't interact with different departments. They don't create an idea of a good product when they are researching. The idea is only to produce a good paper, not produce a good product. For a product, several people have to come together. Now, several departments have to come together. Several researchers have to come together, and so on. So therefore, some of the institutions which are doing all this, they seem to have put in some good practices. As far as the students are concerned, there are the CBS, the competency-based skills will matter a lot in the industry today. So therefore, what are the kind of skills they are acquiring along their route to graduation, and so on. So some of the institutions have invested in third-party content. They have invested in projects. They have invested in connect with the industry, with internships, good internships, and so on. So that is one of the best practices within the schools. But what I find in whatever is happening today in terms of online education, and then the quantum of that growing, that the percentage of that growing within the institutions and so on, there is a marked difference that we'll probably see in future. The divide between good research institutions and good teaching institutions will only widen. The institutions which are into purely online domain, maybe they'll create an infrastructure and create good teaching content and reach out to people and so on. But it will be extremely difficult for them to also, be involved in research and connect with the industries and things like that. So they become good teaching institutions. They can do better over a period of time. And those institutions which are purely involved in research and so on will still need to go onto the campus, do those, the kind of virtualization that we are talking about as a best practice may not really work in that segment. So therefore, there are obviously several good practices that can happen. One of the practices that Professor Shrimali also talked about is a lot of investment that has to come into the educational institutions and so on. My personal understanding is all this time we were investing in brick and mortar, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of physical devices that we see and so on. Big buildings and a lot of all that stuff we were seeing. Not anymore. If you want to build good institutions as we go into the future, a lot of IT infrastructure is required. That too doesn't come cheap. And my simple question is, when you have a connected world, why should you have so many institutions duplicating every single IT initiative and then building and again silos like your brick and mortar institutes? We are not mimicking the existing world. We are trying to create a new world in which there are a lot more opportunities and a lot more engagement with students and reach out to masses and things like that. So that best practice must be built in. Now, how does that happen? For every one of those institutions which you are talking about cannot invest in all that. Even if you want, they will not invest. They will still go by their brick and mortar and watch up whatever they are achieving today, they will achieve. And if they're not able to do it, they'll probably prefer closing down. So therefore, what one should do is create solutions, create hybrid solutions where a lot of technology can be used to bring in institutions together onto single platforms. And for example, if you have Coursera-like content, or you have edX-like content, it costs money. It works on a subscriber basis. A student has to subscribe, pay money, or an institution has to do that, and so on. How many students in different institutions will duplicate this effort? Now, as against that, if you can really build a system where ultimately student is a subscriber, whether he comes from A institute or B institute is immaterial. So therefore, you bring them on the system, build your IT infrastructure where virtualization becomes the norm. And that is where a lot of new technology, new initiatives, new opportunities, new challenges will emerge. And that is where the virtual university will probably become a reality. And if NEP, mind you, merely saying that 25 GER will become 50 GER in 5 years or 10 years is not going to happen like that. Unless you engage the systems, unless you redefine your opportunities, it will not happen. The minute you change from 25 GR to 26 GR, there are millions of students coming in. Can we really afford them to put in a brick and mortar and start teaching them all over again, making them go through 4? And where are the opportunities? You have to, unless you connect them with the placements, with meaningful employment, nothing is going to work out. So that system will peter out over a period of time if you're not able to provide those initiatives to the student. So therefore, if you want to reach out to the world, reach out to everybody and increase the numbers over a period of time, you have to bring in the virtualization as a
digital allows you a scale up in a way that it doesn't. Now, there are questions coming in, but we'll take Dr. Anup Singh. They keep saying the more we change, the more we stay the same.
The
and I keep saying the more digital and
translating.
virtual grows, the value of human touch grows. And again, in the 3C framework in which I see the world right now is, Dr. Mantha talked about collaborativeness, contactlessness, which is virtual, and third is compassionate. Every business has to become a 3C economy, a 3C business: contactless, compassionate, and collaborative. So in this context, what will not change, sir?
Well, one thing which will not change is the importance of thinking, right? In universities, we have to think and not know. So the importance of information may go down, but the importance of thinking may not go down. And the job of future universities would be to help students to think, to use logic, to be analytical, and also do things. So whatever they are thinking, they should be able to prove that through experiments, through simulation. So that is one thing which is not going to change. The second thing which is not going to change, as Professor Mantha was telling, the importance of faculty, right? Because you have to have somebody, who is helping you. Teaching is basically a helping relationship. So unless you have a high quality helper and supporter and coach, there is no way that a student will grow. So that is not going to change, right? What is going to change that as we are going to face cataclysmic and uncertain environment, we have to have students in the university system for more and more time. For example, in 50s and 60s, one could earn a BA degree for 2 years. And then it moved to 3 years. Now we are going to go to 4 years. And at Nirma University, we are planning that all our degrees should be for 5 years. Whatever name we want to give, that is another thing. But unless a student is with the university system for 5 years, he is not ready or she is not ready to face very uncertain environment. So what the student would be doing in these 5 years? Earlier, a student would spend hardly 1 or 2 months on research and at most 1 semester. But when the student is in university system for 5 years, then the student is going to spend at least 1 year on high quality research, high quality innovation, incubation, idea lab. And when the student goes to the real world, the student is fully equipped to face the uncertainty. So that is something which is going to change, right? We call it nowadays integrated programs. So a lot of new integrated programs are going to come in, and the student is required to put more time for higher education. And once the student is there in the university system for 5 years, he knows about modern computer technology, innovation technique, research method, simulation, analytics, right? And he has done several internships. He has done several simulation and real research, or he has experience in incubation. Then this person would be very, very different from what we have today. This person can face the uncertain world and contribute to the prosperity of the world.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. We are seeing a lot of these new institutes, new edutech coming up, and this is not something that's necessarily new. We have had this for a long time now, but they're coming up in a very new way. And there's a discussion where, the difference between the two is maybe that one gives you a degree and an edutech cannot give you a degree, but it can still give you, like you said, information. So I would like to ask you, what are your opinions on the edutech industry and how do you think it will grow in the future or even grow now?
See, even in future, Vasudha, these institutions would be allowed to give degree, right? And as Professor Mantha was mentioning, that if GR is going to go to 50% or 64%, where these students are going to go? They are going to go to these edutech companies and they would get their education, right? And that is also required because you need people of that sort. But they can perform only the function of information dissemination. They can't help students to think. So the real challenge is how to help students to think and to be innovative, right? So that function would be served by other kind of institutions. So there would be two kind of institutions. One would focus on knowledge and information. Another would focus on thinking and innovation.
Fantastic. So, I just want to build on what Vasudha asked. In terms of edutech, all of you are also customers. For example, Dr. Anup Singh, you have a university, you lead that university. So you would be talking to edutech players for their content, subscribing. Now, I want an honest, I get it clear you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that edutech is not a replacement for education. Okay, it is a supplement. It is not a replacement. Second, you said a very important point right up front, that the learning cycles will be shorter. Earlier, we went once in 10 years to relearn. Now, possibly we'll go in once in 5 years or to university. Possibly we learn twice in a year using edutech platforms, right? Right. And what I want to know is what kind of skills you think will be in more demand. I was talking to Raghav Gupta, who's the MD of Coursera, and he said 2 years back, the number one skill that people want to learn was Python. And they were the top 3 were technique. And he said the number one skills are now communication, mindfulness, what we would traditionally call softer skills. So give us a sense of how do you see the paradigm evolving? What shift do you see happening?
Well, these edtech companies can be like publishers. Universities were always depending on publishers for books, databases, so on and so forth. So the universities would be buying more such learning courses, right? And they would be available to students on demand. For example, in our university, we may not have a course on mindfulness. And if any edutech company provides me, it is available in my library and students can take that course, right? So they would be very much required. In terms of skills, we can't really tell what skill would be required, right? But we can see where the world is going. So the world would require a very high level of technology skills, which skills we don't know, but in area of technology. The second is that we need to understand the human brain, right? Neuroscience. So that is another area where people would like to learn more and more about neuroscience. And the third thing is that people would like to evolve themselves. People would like to focus on themselves. So some of the courses which have been ignored, like pottery, like painting, like dance, like theater, they would be very, very important courses, right? So we require those courses which would equip the students to deal with the outside world, but we also require courses to help the students to deal with their own self. Because if they are able to deal with the outside world and they are not able to deal with their own self, then they are going to be poor citizens, they are going to be poor workers, they are going to be poor leaders.
Absolutely. And I tell you, Dr. Shrimali and Dr. Singh, you're here. You were in MDI when I was studying. You were my professor in 94, 96. And Dr. Punam Sehgal is not with us today on the panel, but I remember taking a course that she had launched called the Personal Growth Lab. I think it was one of the best courses that I did in my life. Because I took because it really helped me ask myself who I am, what I want to do, what are my strengths, what are my blind spots. As they say, you know that you don't know something, but there are a lot of things you don't even know that you don't know. So, I think behavioral aspects and personal evolution and personal improvement and, working on oneself and anything that helps you do that will take on a longer and a more important position in your life. As a learner, whatever the age of that learner be, learning doesn't stop. I just want to ask Dr. Shrimali. Dr. Shrimali, if I had to ask you, you talked about in the boardrooms, we talk about budgets, we talk about revenues, we talk of budget allocations. We don't talk of impact. You didn't say it like that. Learning, so on and so forth. Tell me, what are the new parameters by which an institution should be judged? Typically, we look at placements, or if a certain institution can give you a certain number of placement, then the best, right? And in education, the issue is that educations build a reputation and then they tend to extract the best. So clearly, there is a certain virtuous cycle that exists. So how do you make sure that you create excellence beyond that? And how do you create a new framework for evaluation of success of an institution? Today, everybody in the global world is saying that GDP is not the right indicator post-corona of a nation's health. It has to be something else. In the past, we looked at the gross happiness index, let's say, in which Bhutan did well. Of course, Bhutan is a very small country. So similarly, in the context of that, what do you think educational institutions need to measure themselves in terms of impact?
I think this has been emphasized by Dr. Mantha as also Dr. Anup Singh, that the real driver for any change in an educational institution is teacher or the faculty. And one has to make investment in faculty. I was treating a ballpoint figure of 50% of the salary of a faculty has to be spent on his development. As you rightly mentioned, as an educational leader, you have to see which faculty, this development process requires a lot of support to the faculty. Each faculty is different, his aptitudes are different, his interests are different. Somebody is a great researcher, somebody is a great teacher, somebody is a great consultant. So as an educational leader, you have to provide right kind of freedom to them. I remember when I became the director, there were 2 faculty members who were being considered that their performance is low. And they came to me and they said, sir, I don't want to do any kind of a teaching. Profile was great. And so I said, what is the issue? The person said, sir, I want to do research. And teaching distracts me a lot. So I don't want to do teaching for a year. Now, having discussed a lot with him, I gave him a promise that, okay, I will not give any teaching assignment. What more you require? He said, sir, just give me just 3-4 lakh rupees for my travel and these expenses, because I want to go to those remote areas where I want to do work with those terrorist organizations who are working in Chhattisgarh and those regions. I would like to go and live there. My outcome will be a book and a research work for public policy. I think that after 1 year, the book has come out. The person did not teach. Another colleague has come out with a paper, a research paper in the electricity industry, and he is rated as one of the best researcher in the world listing. His name was figuring. So I think these 2 guys were not great teachers, but they were great researchers, and we were forcing them to teach. So I think in academic institutions, most important part is the kind of faculty you have. Unfortunate part is very many times you don't have the required number of faculty. You don't have the faculty doesn't have the required kind of freedom to do things which they want to do. And a person who has empathy with them, that what kind of support they require. I think if these things are given, and you rightly mentioned that yes, edutech institutions and all those educate companies, they will be required, they'll be giving database and information. But this personality development, developing emotional intelligence, developing their capability to deal with complex things, because future is going to be very uncertain. In an uncertain future, if you have to take decisions, then the decision-making capability has to be built, and that will not be done only through the analytic courses. Courses will be enabler. They will be enabler, but ultimately person has to take decision. And therefore his psychological mapping, his personality, his profile, that has to be built. And that has to be built by teachers, in the classroom as also outside the classroom. And that is where the significance of a campus or an institution comes up. That it is not a transaction oriented. That's what I was saying, is a process oriented. Once you have a student, I remember when you have been there at MDI, first batch, MBA was not known, but you were very clear in your mind that I want to be setting up organization, I want to do bigger things. And therefore, I don't want to be an employee, I want to be an employer. I don't want to be searching for job, I would be creating job. And I think at that time when we were working together, because that was a great learning institution. In fact, you contributed a lot in building MDI, because first batch students and institutions are not known by the students and the teachers. We created that environment, and today that environment has paid off. So therefore, in an institution, 3-4 things which have to happen. One, the thinking ability, what Dr. Anup was mentioning. For that, there has to be a lot of emphasis given, because future is going to be uncertain. We can't produce students after students who don't have thinking capability. Second, edutech institutions are required, because a lot of databases would be required, a lot of information there, a lot of research is happening. So all that data need to be captured and should be available to the students to think, analyze, think, and work on it. You will require the top management of the institutions to make right kind of investment in technology, as also on the faculty. And finally, faculty should feel free and empowered to do things which are really required for developing the education system, as also helping add value to the students. You talked about growth lab, which Punam was doing. Yes, it is relevant even today. In fact, these behavioral things cannot be taught through these edutech companies. They require a lot of reflection, a lot of working together. So I think in academic institutions, these things need to continue to happen. And lastly, I would like to say that ultimately institutions will be basically branding what all outcomes which they are creating. And society will be judging whether this degree is worth calling it as a degree. Like, okay, there are a large number of MBAs available, but is it from a premier institution, and what kind of competencies these institutions have built? So I think those kind of things are.
I want to get to the closing comments, and let me start this time with Dr. Anup Singh. Dr. Anup Singh, if I talk to you in 3 years from now, what would have Nirma University achieved? Give me the top 2-3 things that you think under your leadership at Nirma University you will be able to build on what has this panel shared and what you yourself have shared.
Well, in next 3 years, we would like to be known for our incubation center and research park. So we are investing in a big way in our research park and incubation center, and we hope that we produce good startups. The second thing is that we would also like to be known for our student research. Till now, most institutions have ignored student research, and they come out with brilliant ideas, right? And they are also very good in writing, and their potential is not tapped. So in next 3 years, today about 10 of our undergraduate students are able to write papers, and maybe 3 years down the line, at least 30-40 of them should be writing regularly in good journals. And thirdly, we would like to be known for our investment in faculty development, faculty training, sending them for international exposure, and giving them all support which they require. So these are some of the things for which we would like to be known in the next 3 years.
Okay, and good. And what about practices post-COVID? Some of the things that have really, because of what has happened in the last 16 months, the transformation of virtualization, the transformation through digital. In that context, what will we see? Will we see some of your courses being a mix of online and offline, or that's already a big reality? So the train has left the station, so to say.
See, technology is going to be a big enabler. For example, we used to invite in every institute 1 or 2 international experts for 1 week or 2 weeks, right? This year, we were able to invite more than 200 international scholars through webinars and digital workshops. So that is the impact of technology. And the teaching is going to be very, very different compared to what it was 18 months ago, right? So we are going to live in a very different world. And of course, we are going to adopt some of the good courses which EdTech are offering, even SWAYAM is offering, because UGC has said that up to 20% of your courses should be such. And if not 20%, definitely, we would strive for at least 10% of our courses should be chosen by the students from whatever is available online.
Okay. Your closing comments, Dr. Shrimali?
Yeah. I think the technology is going to lead. These last 2 years have taught many people, many teachers were afraid of using technology. Now everybody is now getting acquainted to using technology and now become much more proficient in using technology. This is one thing which has definitely happened and is going to grow. I am able to visualize that nearly 50% of the content part or the knowledge part would be all disseminated through the technology platforms. But yes, skill part and capability building part, personality building part will be happening at the institution. I'm able to see globalization would happen because the large number of courses, specialized courses would be coming from specialized faculty from different parts of the globe. So that is going to happen. Many students who are doing their MBAs will additionally do specialized courses of purchase management or logistic management or financial management, some capsule courses, and they are globally offered the short duration courses. So that kind of trend I am able to visualize more and more. I am able to visualize, you like it, whether the institution likes it or doesn't like it, industry connect has to be built, and they will have to re-look at their curriculum almost every second year to revise the content and align the content with the emerging requirements. So a lot of research is happening, a lot of new developments are happening. So curriculum development has to be a rolling process through which development should be happening, and it will become much more dynamic. I am able to visualize that quality of education will improve with as technology as a mover.
Final word, Dr. Mantha. You've been a policymaker and an educationist both. So you have a unique perspective of what is possible and what is likely to happen.
There are two things. First of all, something that is already happening. Some of the institutions are trying it out. And like, for example, in the university with which I am associated, the KL University also, we are trying to integrate seamlessly the online content into the regular curriculum and build in different kind of blended models which will allow students to learn and so on. So basically it's a process of skilling, reskilling and upskilling. So it's a question of bridging the gap of what the industry needs in terms of what new programs are required, what new courses are required, how to build the employability of the student, how to build the competency-based skills. That's one part of it which some of the institutions are doing. Some of the institutions are doing it well, some of the institutions are trying their best and so on. The second part, however, which I would like to see and not happening, probably will happen in future, which will be an imperative kind of thing. There's probably no choice. The example is based on how the institutions are built in Germany. There are two societies. One is a Max Planck Society, which builds institutions which do fundamental research. And the second is the Fraunhofer Society, which also sets up institutions which do applied research. They use the basic research, they use the postulations that the Max Planck Society institutions do, and then they build products. So what happens is they build a campus around which most of the research centers of different disciplines, different products, they all come on the same campus. And then there are ideas generated to connect the society in terms of products, in terms of what the society needs, new products, and so new ideas germinate from there. And then the applied research institution would probably would only develop them using the help of the institution set up by the Max Planck Society. Now, what happens is there's a nice synergy that is built between the industry, between the research, between the teaching institutions, and so on. So the focus is not on producing papers. The focus is on producing products. Papers happen as a consequence. So therefore, that is
applied research again.
Absolutely, that is something that must happen in this country.
The incubator model, the Y Combinators, have to happen on campuses in India.
We have DRDO, labs. We have CSIR labs. We have so many, and they are all doing good work, but they don't come together to create a product. It happens certainly in some small sectors, but like for example, you bring in requirements of a defense establishment, or requirements of an infrastructural equipment that you require, or in the pharma sector today. How many people are actually, there are good papers, very good papers, and people are rewarded for that. But how many of them actually translate into products? That's the question. That's something that must happen in future. Thank you.
Dr. Batra, I know you said this was the closing remarks.
No,
but,
go ahead.
Yeah, we have a lot of students in the panel, I believe, and they're all, obviously struggling with this sudden change that's happened from, in class to going online. And as, leaders of educational institutes, and what is some advice that you can give to our young viewers right now? We can start with Dr. Shrimali.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think once you accept a student, then he's a student, not limited to the hours of classroom hours. He's a student with you. So therefore, you have to understand the person, what kind of work he is doing. So therefore, a relationship of teacher-taught relationship should exist between the student and the teacher. Responsibility lies with the teacher as also with the student. And then learning is individual. So the person has to learn and raise all the questions to the teacher. And teacher should be honest, whatever he knows, he should help the students. And if he doesn't know, he should find an answer to that and then help. But I think the attitude to help students should foundation around which the relationship should grow.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Mantha, quick response to you on the same thing.
I mean, two things must happen from a student's perspective. The ability to learn online, build on concepts, and using it as a there is a lot of self-motivation that is required in online medium. It's not only some lecture that goes on and the other side really do not know whether he's engaged, not engaged, so on. So therefore, a lot of motivation is required from the person. The second thing is this online education business will lead to personalized education. So therefore, a student would probably will get to choose courses from different places, put all of them together, something from MDI, something from some other institution, put them together and build his skills and so on. So that's the second part. The third most important part is somehow the digital divide must be addressed. This education is not for people who are in the cities. They of course can manage anyway. And the bigger question is, how do we reach out to our remotest places or villages where people do not have a smartphone, some of them do not even have a TV at home. So therefore, mobile vans, which also have hotspots, which have PCs, which have content being from somewhere being projected within the vans, those vans going to the villages, all those kind of things must happen. And then probably the bandwidth is an issue. I mean, even in this current thing, we see issues of bandwidth. So therefore, the question of using technology, using the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum in order to have better throughputs, all those issues must be looked at, and the digital divide must be addressed if the whole paradigm of blended learning, online learning, 50 GER, all that has to be solved, please solve the digital divide.
Fantastic. Final word, Dr. Anup Singh.
Well, learning is basically a social process, and the problem with the online learning is that you lose social touch. So it can be very depressive, and students can go through mental health problem, and we have experienced that. So what we do at Nirma University, that we form a group of 6 students, and they interact with each other. They provide social support to each other, and the students are able to maintain their social connect, as well as they are able to maintain their mental health. The second thing is that education is also about doing things, and in online it becomes very, very difficult. However, there are several simulations which are available, and they can give a feel of doing. So we also use a lot of simulations. So this is my message to teachers, that they should find relevant simulative exercises and use them so that the students are excited and engaged.
Thank you so much. Thank you on behalf of me and Asudha and the BW Education team. We thank you for making, we've done over the last 16 months many conversations on education, and but you were still able to bring in the right deep perspectives and knit it together like a necklace that has various pearls. It kind of fell into place. So thank you for bringing in those deep perspectives. You're practitioners, and we look forward to more interactions with you. And I agree with 3 aspects that really came out well. One is Dr. Anup Singh's point about that learning is a lifelong and a social process. So education, while may have edutech as a component, it cannot be a substitute for whole education. Second, the process of learning is becoming shorter and shorter. Third is the point of technology and technology-led interactions only growing, and the investments will go into it. And last but not the least, Dr. Mantha and Dr. Shrimali both said that there may be a fully functional virtual university on the cloud. Theoretically, it is possible, but the institutions that exist today may also reinvent themselves in some form, adopting the best of both worlds. So clearly, the role of teachers and how they adapt to this is very crucial. We'll see you. We have 5 Wednesday Wisdoms in June, but for the last Wednesday Wisdom on 26th May, we'll see you at 4:30 p.m. same time on bweducation.com, and we will have a guest who is really multifaceted in her achievements. We'll have Dr. Sarup Rawal, who has been an actor, but she's a teacher. She was winner of the World Teacher Prize. So we will have Dr. Sarup Rawal, which I'm sure Dr. Mantha knows her well. Dr. Anup Singh knows her well because she lives in Ahmedabad and Bombay. And of course, Dr. Shrimali, because of a number of years in this sector, would know well. So we will look forward to a conversation with Dr. Sarup Rawal next Wednesday, 4:30 p.m., same time as we do every Wednesday. And the June lineup, the next 5 lineup, we'll announce on 26th. Again, exciting set of education entrepreneur and education leaders. We'll talk to you about the future and what they are doing to create the future. Thank you so much for talking to us, and we look forward to more interactions with all 3 of you. Grateful to you for your time, your inputs, and the impact that you make through what you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe. God bless you.